I would call her one of the matriarchs of Trinity. She's married to Tim Osborne, and she's been all over the world doing missions with Trinity. So show her some love and give her your attention.
Oh, good morning. What a wonderful greeting. It's a joy to be here to just share with you the bright light of what God is doing in Bujumbura, Burundi. In August 22nd, 2009, I stepped off my final flight after 2 hours of flying onto the land, the soil of Bujumbura, Burundi. I had never been there before, and the first person that approached me was this very short man, and he was wearing an official uniform, and he asked for my passport. I gave it to him, and he looked up straight in my eyes, and immediately I felt darkness, I felt evil, I felt hatred, and I just wanted to get back on the plane and go home. I didn't know why I was there. It was probably the worst hate I had ever felt in my life. And I thought about him, and I thought, why is there so much darkness in him? He returned my passport, and I thought to myself, is he a Hutu? Is he a Tutsi? Did he kill people in the genocide in 1994? You see, there was a genocide that happened in that country, and 1 million people were slaughtered. These were ethnic Tutsis. They were slaughtered in 90 days. And that country was left with so much devastation. And I thought, how was he a part of that? What was his story? What happened to him? Well, right before I went on that trip, I read 2 books. One was Left to Tell, and one was Led by Faith. And these books were written by Immaculée, and she had survived that genocide. And those books talked about the atrocities that happened to her family, and it talked about just the evil that perpetrated that country and left thousands and thousands of women, orphans, and widows. So I left there. We had a very small team. There were probably only 4 of us there, gathered up our things. We walked outside that airport, and my next greeting was Peace Nahornberry. And I don't know, some of you may have met Peace. She has been here, right? Yeah? Yeah. She oozes peace, let me just say. I needed her warm hug. We're going to get this to say. I needed her warm hug. I needed to see her nice smile. I just needed, her countenance was one of peace that just settled that anxiety that I was feeling. Well, Peace also went through that genocide. But partly through that, she ended up being able to move her family to Canada. And while in Canada, she responded to a call on God's life, on God's call on her life for her to go back. And she went back and she started this home care program for the orphans and the widows. So we were there as a small team for the first time to really encourage her in this program, to encourage the leaders, to get to know the women, to love on them, to take care of them. It was a very emotional week for me being there. And really, that night, I didn't sleep very much. We had driven through the streets to get to where we were going to be staying in the hotel, and I saw these high walls erected everywhere I looked with barbed wire over the tops of them and just shards of glass where people were still living in fear. I saw 50, at least, young boys that lived on the streets as beggars, and they all slept at a gas station that was abandoned because they had no home to go to. I saw just the devastation of people in wheelchairs and scars on people's faces, and every time I saw something like that, these stories were just going through my mind of what is their story, how were they hurt? Everybody in that country was carrying a wound from this genocide. And it had been 15 years, and yet I couldn't see where anything had really changed. But there was a bright light there, and it was with Peace and what she was doing in this program. So the next day, Peace invited me to sit in on listening to the stories of women because there was a waiting list. There was over 100 women that wanted to be in this program, and Peace would only be able to accept 35 of them. So I sat there and I listened to some of these stories of widows who saw their husband murdered only to be raped by that perpetrator. Stories of widows who were living in the streets, and with their children they were eating charcoal for food. Orphans who were beggars. They were everywhere. I had seen all those orphans. They were all over the place. But they had no home. They had no place to sleep. They didn't know how to read. They couldn't get a job. The country was just still in so much devastation from what had happened. And as I sat there and I heard those stories, I saw the sorrow and the despair on these women's faces. I saw the shame that they carried for the way that they were having to live. And I was just overcome. I just sat there and started crying. I couldn't control it. We'd have these little breaks. I'd go outside and sob, and I'd pull it back together, and I'd come back in, and I thought, wow, the stories I read in the book was one thing, but now these were real women, and they were women that I knew, and they were real stories that were touching my heart. This program that 35 women were going to get to be a part of would be a 10-month program. It would go from September to August. And in that 10 months, these women would be given their first Burundi Bible. Many of them would learn to read, and they would learn to read through the Burundi Bible. They would be given medication. Most of them had AIDS. A place to sleep, food for themselves and for their children. They were going to learn a skill to sew and be able to sew their own clothes and clothes for their children. They were given counseling to work through their grief and their loss. What else? It was a home care place of love, of welcoming. It didn't matter if you were Hutu. It didn't matter if you were Tutsi. Nobody knew. It didn't matter if you were an orphan, if you were a widow. Those doors were open for care to be given and wounds to be healed. And that's what was taking place. Well, 2 years later, on the exact same day, y'all, August 22nd, but it was 2011, I got the privilege to go back to Burundi. And this time it was for a celebration because it was graduation day. And I, sat there, and I could just see in that room. It was a small room. We were in metal chairs. The women all came in this Burundian clothing that really represented honor. And many of them had never worn that clothing before in their life. So as they came in the room, they were hugging each other, laughing. The music got started. They would sing and they would dance, and the joy just flooded that room. It just flooded it. And there was a girl there, Justine, and she ran up to me and she said, "Today I wore these clothes, but I forgot who I was," because Justine was 20 years old. And she had 2 children. And she worked on the rice plantation. But the rice plantation was very brutal work. It was very hard work. It did not provide enough food for her and her children. She couldn't take care of them. It didn't provide the shelter. So she had been in a very difficult place for a long time. And here she was. And she said, "Today I received my first Burundi Bible. And I can now read the Bible. And I can encourage other women." She said, "Now I am a beautiful woman, and my classmates are beautiful women. I can make clothes for myself, and I can now sew clothes for my children." Well, her name was called, and as she walked up on that stage, all I saw was this beautiful woman dressed in the robe of God's righteousness. And once again, the tears came. I couldn't help but be filled with joyful tears over what I was seeing and what God had done, because Josephine had discovered how deeply loved and how fully pleasing she was in Christ. And her life was changed, and these women were changed because of it. They were going to all each receive a sewing machine with materials that day. They were all lined up across the wall. They couldn't wait to get their new sewing machines. And she ends the ceremony with a verse. I have it written in my Bible ever since that day. I've got the date there. And it was Isaiah 43, verses 18 and 19. She said, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you perceive it? I'm making a way in the desert and streams in the wasteland." This is what has been happening since that time for the last few years in Burundi. This program has been going on every year for 10 months. And it's still a small program, but now she has got a group in the morning that she does, and now she does a group in the afternoon, so she could just multiply being able to reach more of these women. But I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you today to change the life of one of these women, because their life is just as valuable and just as important as our own. This program that we would like for you to be a part of is one of providing the sewing machine and all the materials that they will need to start a business so they can be a seamstress. The startup cost for that is only $350. So I really want to invite you to join me in making a difference in a woman like Justine. Thank you.